Continuing with the wonderful theme of Mexico and looking at an old book from the late 1970s, I'm going to go for a chapter now which is about customs and superstition. Strange encounters, go easy on the natives, customs you'll want to observe, dress, mealtime, parties, invitations, compadrazgo, others, and superstitions from the hot and cold to the bogeyman. I was sitting in a tiny store in the highlands of southern Mexico, sipping a drink of the horrible local liquor, waiting for the afternoon rain to pass. Suddenly a weird wailing cry sounded outside. Before I could get up from my bench, a boisterous crowd poured through the doorway, pushing, shoving, and falling over each other. 15 or 20 bodies were packed into the tiny room, and it took me a second to notice that each was dressed in the most hideous costumes and masks that I'd ever seen. Many of the men were dressed as women, but their faces, bound with strips of inner tube, tape, foil, and dirty cloth, were not human. Although I'd seen a good many Indian fiesta costumes, none could compare with these. I felt an involuntary shudder of revulsion as they pressed me tightly against the wall. With hoarse, drunken, animal grunts and moans, later I learned that by custom no intelligible word could be spoken, the group made it clearly known to the wary woman behind the counter that they wanted liquor. Mud-covered hands grabbed the bottles, and their contents were drained in what seemed like a suicidal chug-a-lugs. When the last had been finished off, a new chorus of noise began. I had finally been noticed. With the hair prickling on the back of my neck, I sensed that something unusual was about to happen and edged into a corner. Suddenly, a grotesque, bird-like face was inches from my nose. A slender hardwood staff raised menacingly over my head. The nightmare bird grunted and rapped me sharply across the shoulder with the staff. With this, the entire group moved in, kicking, prodding, jabbing, and generally bouncing me around the room. Realizing that I was slightly outnumbered, I threw my arms over my head and retreated as best I could into a corner. I'd noticed almost immediately that although I was getting a fairly good pounding, no one made any real effort to hurt me. Suddenly, the beating stopped. I looked up apprehensively, and the bird figure, apparently the leader, broke the tension by saying in clear Spanish, "Buy us a drink." I nodded to the grinning proprietress and resigned myself to blowing a month's cantina lounging in one round. To my surprise, however, she served only a small amount, and there was no objection from my assailants. After drinking the liquor, they rushed for the door, grunting and brawling into the muddy street outside. I paid my bill quickly and took the opposite direction home. A few weeks later, a dignified elderly man approached me in the same store. He identified himself as the bird figure, explained the ritual significance of what they had been doing — it was an Indian dance group — and thanked me for my cooperation. Although I insisted that it had been my pleasure, he offered me the use of a house, rent-free, for as long as I and my friends cared to use it. He knew he could trust me, he said, because I had acceded to his request for a drink, even though the dancers could have gone ahead and drained every bottle at my expense. What if I had said no? I asked. Oh, well, the man said with a grin, we'd have worked you over a little longer to change your mind. Traveling is a learning process that takes place in a real rather than an artificial environment. Mexico is not a butterfly pinned to a piece of cork, passive and subject to the curious collector's whims. Nor is it a giant amusement park constructed and controlled for the tourist's benefit. By learning to treat a country or a town, group, etc., as a living thing, you will soon perceive its reaction to you and what you do. Specific customs can be studied in advance, but if you're a sensitive traveller, you'll never need a guidebook or anthropology text to tell you how the people feel about what you're doing. Cultural shock is a popular term used to describe what happens when tourists have their minds completely blown by a foreign country and culture. What most tourists fail to realize is that cultural shock works both ways. Imagine, for example, the effect on a quiet farming village when 2 carloads of tourists unexpectedly drop in. The automobiles, late semi-luxury models, stop in front of the tiny adobe municipal building. All eyes in the plaza watch curiously as 5 elderly couples climb out of the cars and into the hot sun. They are members of a large tour group and each wears an identification badge. The men are wearing Bermuda shorts with socks, print shirts and straw hats with translucent plastic visors. The women are wearing tight pants, new serapes, and floppy straw hats with Recuerdo de Mexico emblazoned across them in brightly coloured yarn. They are all very pale in complexion and peer myopically at everything in sight. The men on the iron benches in the plaza are by now watching in open amazement. The tourists are having a heated conversation. One of the women keeps pointing towards an old man dozing on a bench, waving her camera and looking excited and upset. Finally, she goes over to him and says quite vocally, "Cuánto?" The old man jerks up with surprise and is again abruptly asked, "Cuánto?" He shakes his head slowly, then begins to wag his finger back and forth to indicate that he doesn't understand. "What's the matter, Phyllis?" another woman calls out loudly. "Won't he let you take his picture?" "I asked him how much he wants, but he won't answer me," Phyllis complains, ignoring the bewildered looks the old man is casting about. "Well, just give him some money and take it anyway," her friend advises. By now, a crowd is gathering and the tourists feel distinctly uneasy. Should tourists unwittingly violate some local custom, it is unlikely that the irate populace will stone them to death to appease angered gods. Establishing rapport with people is very difficult, however, if respect and appreciation for the beliefs of others is not shown. The natural gap in understanding that lies between 2 cultures can be bridged by an awareness that differences are not good or bad, right or wrong, they're just different. Customs of dress are probably the most often violated by tourists. The offenders include all groups from super straight to ultra hip. The best way to avoid looking out of place or offending anyone is to look as much like everyone else as you can. You don't have to conform too strictly to avoid attention, just be reasonable. Incongruous clothing is commonly worn by tourists, even those who normally take great care with their appearance. The popular image of a red-faced American wearing a gaudy flowered shirt, a grossly large sombrero, and painful new sandals on sunburned feet is embarrassingly accurate. What many people fail to realize, however, is that a long blonde-haired hippie chick, barefoot, wearing patched jeans, a man's Oaxaca wedding shirt, a huichol belt, and strings of beads, is even more ridiculous looking to the Mexican eyes, especially the Indians. Since women generally attract more attention than men, it's not surprising that their clothing and the way they wear it is particularly subject to inspection and comment. In most cases, the attention will be stares, smiles, frowns, and shaking heads, wagging fingers and occasional whistles, leers, and lewd comments. In extreme cases, such as an overexposure of bare skin, the cops may tell a woman to wear something more decent. Indians are especially sensitive to clothing and styles, probably because much of what they wear is handmade and has a distinctive and almost invariable appearance. The more traditional wouldn't wear Western-style clothing if it was given to them. The best way to offend the maximum number of people, regardless of their individual opinions about clothing styles, is to go partially or fully nude in public. A man can usually wear a t-shirt and pants, but a bare chest is frowned upon except at the beach. Men are often seen on crowded beaches wearing nothing but a pair of baggy, semi-transparent undershorts. Though their balls may be all but hanging out in public view, they are properly attired for the beach. The rules for women are much stricter, and although a small boy may romp stark naked, a small girl, even though just a toddler, will cause a scandal if she appears with a bare ass. Women will occasionally bathe in secluded spots with their breasts exposed, but will rarely remove their skirts. Mixed bathing with soap is not common and is considered pretty daring. Food and drink. Customs and rituals for eating and drinking are most commonly seen in humble restaurants and private homes. The more purely Mexican the surroundings, the more traditional the customs. In tiny restaurants or eating stalls, several people will be seated at one or two tables. When you wish to sit down, ask "con permiso?" May I? And one or all of the diners will say something affirmative, usually "andale," go ahead. This is strictly a formality, but it breaks the silence. Buen provecho, good appetite, is used as a greeting or blessing to those already eating and as a means of excusing yourself when you've finished. The response is gracias. You can also say "con permiso" when leaving. The exchange of greetings and their responses may become confusing. In some areas, people say gracias when they leave the table. Whatever is said, answer it with something, gracias or andale, etc. In a traditional household, 5 regular meals are served. The first, desayuno, early in the morning, coffee and sweetbreads. Then early lunch, almuerzo. A big late lunch, comida, the main meal. A light meal, merienda, like a tea. And then cena, a late supper. Still hungry? Private fiestas and pachangas or blowouts are rarely bring your own bottle or potluck. Although both these customs are being adopted by middle and upper class Mexicans, at the most common type of party, the hosts provide everything. Traditional Mexicans might even be insulted if a guest were to bring food or refreshments. Machismo says that when you invite somebody to your house, you make damn sure they'll be well taken care of. In obviously poor households, however, a discreetly offered gift will almost always be accepted, especially if you say, "Es nuestra costumbre," it is our custom. If you're going to someone's house to eat and want to take something, keep it simple. Flowers or a plant, a small bottle of tequila, or a papaya or pineapple. If the party is a birthday, Saint's Day, or wedding, a gift is probably in order. What to take? For men, a bottle of brandy. For women, a plant or knick-knack, and for children, a toy. Records also make good gifts, but books are rarely given unless you're certain the person likes to read. Most Mexicans don't. At some parties, the host or hostess is expected to give gifts to the guests. This is called el remojo. A remojo party usually celebrates a new house, car, or other major acquisition. El paseo, the stroll or promenade. This is a much publicized Mexican custom. A description of a typical evening's paseo is essential to hack travel articles. Sharp-eyed chaperones dressed in black hover behind dark-eyed flashing beauties. The reality is somewhat different, with the dark-eyed beauties often exchanging off-color insults with their male counterparts, slouching around the plaza in shiny pointed shoes, gnawing sullenly on giant wads of chicles. The lively atmosphere may be enhanced by an occasional nip of tequila, giving one young man the courage to call out, "Oh, my little dear, you have a body just like a dove." The target of this piropo, flirtatious remark, responds with a rude hand signal. "A big butt and skinny legs," the young man adds, joining his friends in sarcastic laughter. The paseo occurs almost every night of the week, with full participation on Sunday evening. This is the night to dress up. For the Catherine, the dude, to put on his best caclis, shoes, and do a little panthering among the ladies. A set of keys dangles casually from the hand or pants pocket, as though an automobile were parked somewhere nearby instead of a rattletrap bicycle. The men and boys circle the plaza in one direction, the unattached ladies in knots of 2 to 4, and couples in the opposite. This provides a good view of the opposition and many opportunities for brief eye contacts, wisecracks, and suggestive body movements. Those who have budding relationships usually attach themselves to another couple as a sort of buffer against looking too serious. If things work out, they'll be seen later, pressed into the frustrating semi-privacy of a shadowy doorway. Compadrazgo is a very important system of relationships between people who may otherwise have no formal connection. It is easiest to compare with the godparent relationship in other societies, though two people may become compadres without involving children. Anything of importance can lead to new compadres: marriage, births, buying a new house, a business deal, a close friendship, and so on. We have a friend who acquired a compadre when he managed to save up the money for a new pickup truck. Compadres are supposed to support each other in times of need, though they often don't. This tightens the social structure, especially in poorer communities. Compadres are often on quite different social and economic levels, however. This is another type of bridge usually based on mutual respect. A businessman, for example, who accepts an employee's invitation to be his compadre on the birth of a child, is now more than just an employer. He's a shirt-tail relative. Church etiquette. Although the Catholic Church no longer requires women to cover their heads when inside a church, many still do. The more traditional people, particularly in small towns and in the country, still observe meatless Fridays as well. Men take their hats off in church, and devout Mexican men remove them when passing a church. A very brief prayer is given when passing a church or a shrine. Mal ojo. The evil eye is believed to be caused by someone who admires another person too intensely or thinks ill of them. Some people can cast mal ojo at will, but they are, fortunately, uncommon. An otherwise normal person can inadvertently cast the eye on another without being aware of it. Persistent illnesses are often caused by the evil eye. Consult a curandera. Vientos, winds, and mal aires, bad airs, are a common cause of various ailments, though usually associated with respiratory problems, toothache, cramps, and paralysis. During the night and early morning, you'll see people with their heads swathed in cloths or towels as a protection against bad air. The worst aspect of a belief in winds capable of causing illness is that people avoid what we consider normal ventilation. Bus windows, even on hot days, remain firmly closed. Children go around bundled up to the ears as if for a snowstorm when their parents are behind the house harvesting bananas. If you pick up a Mexican hitchhiker, you'll probably notice that open windows will be discreetly closed or avoided. The bogeyman will be waiting for you in Mexico. He is commonly called El Diablo, the devil, El Coco, the head, as in bald head, El Sombreron, also El Sombrerudo, the big hat. El Sombreron has the rude habit of copulating with female horses and then braiding their tails. He is easily recognizable. Look for a giant headless man wearing a huge hat and riding a flying white horse. A close friend who saw El Sombreron late one night sneered when I suggested it might be the bottle of tequila he drank, rather than a real ghost. The tequila just allowed me to see him, he answered. If sober people could see him, they'd all be scared. La Llorona, the weeper, is a woman dressed in long white robes. She drags around her floor-length hair, crying out, "Ay, mis hijos, ay, my children," and giving bad little girls and boys the night sweats. Chanecos live in the forests and jungles. People follow their friendly laughter and then disappear. No one who has set after a Chaneco has ever returned to describe them. Survivors of a Chaneco chase do exist, but they are hopelessly insane. Note that these are just a few examples. Every area has its own variations or embellishment on spirits and ghosts. One of the most popular in the north is the ghost of Pancho Villa. He does everything from scaring children to healing illnesses and bestowing good luck. Watch out for him. And there we have some detail from the People's Guide to Mexico on customs and superstitions.